Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily spoiler video featuring some really sweet new cards from Amonkhet. So let's jump right into it. We actually got a lot to talk about today because a few minutes ago we got the rare land cycle, and this land cycle is actually super sweet and super powerful. We now have, in Magic, cycling dual lands. We've never had cycling dual lands, so these lands, on level 1, enter the battlefield tapped all the time no matter what. Alright, you expect a downside for a massive upside, and being able to cycle your land is a huge upside. Being able to, when you're flooding out, discard a land and draw a new card and hopefully find action, that's a really huge deal and really makes these lands super exciting, not to mention some interesting synergies we'll talk about as we go along. So the other big thing about these lands, apart from cycling, is they have the basic land types, which means you can fetch them out, you can get them with Farseek, they trigger different basic land type matters stuff. Right now, that's not super relevant for Standard, definitely matters in Modern, but we'll see what happens in the future of Standard. So probably the first comparison I see for the cycling lands from Amonkhet is the Scry lands that we had a few years ago in Theros block. So these are both land cycles that kind of draw you cards. There are some differences. With the Scry lands, you're always going to get a land out of the deal. When you play the land, you get to Scry, which isn't quite worth drawing a card, but it is worth, like, I don't know, 0.7 of drawing a card or something. It is valuable, and it does add up to card advantage over the course of a game. With the cycling lands, things are slightly different because you either choose to get the land or to draw a card. But I still think it's a really good comparison because they're both lands that can kind of draw you cards, always enter the battlefield tapped. The other thing to look at is basic land types. So here the lands sort of resemble shock lands in the Battle for Zendikar duels. I don't think you're actually going to play the cycling lands over the shock lands in Modern or over the BFZ lands in Modern, but it is a big benefit to be able to take advantage of basic land types matters thing, and this has led some people to speculating that maybe, just maybe, Wizards is thinking of bringing back the fetch lands to Standard, perhaps this fall, in whatever the fall set is. So I don't know. Last time we had fetchable duels and fetch lands in Standard, we had a really rough go of it. Decks were super expensive. Everyone just played 4 or 5 colors. So on one hand, I kind of hope that that's not what's happening, but I will admit it is a bit suspicious that Wizards would put the basic land types onto the cycling lands if they weren't going to do anything in Standard. So it does make you think that maybe that is something that Wizards could possibly do. So obviously not saying we are getting fetch lands this fall, but it does make you think twice and wonder, why did they put these basic land types on there if there's nothing that cares about basic land types? So as far as Standard goes, I think this is basically the hierarchy of lands. So you're always going to play the cycling lands over other tap lands that don't do anything, like Meandering River. You will often, I think, play them over the Shadows duels, like Port Town, which aren't very good. They're pretty lacking. Once you get to the Battle for Zendikar duels, and especially the fast lands, that's where it gets a little more questionable. I can't imagine that you will usually play the cycling lands over the fast lands. You'll probably play them together a decent amount, but I don't think you'd choose the cycling lands over the fast lands. However, with the Battle for Zendikar duels, it's really close. You're basically trading the upside of entering untapped on turns 3 or 4 or 5 for the upside of being able to cycle and get a new card. And I'm not exactly sure how to weigh that out. I expect that the cycling might give the new lands an edge, but it'll probably partly depend on how exactly your deck is built. If you're playing a really slow controlling land, you definitely want the cycling lands. In more aggressive decks that really care about having an untapped land on turn 3, on turn 4 to curve out, then you might go more towards the Battle for Zendikar duels. As far as specific interactions in Standard, 2 that jump out right away are Splendid Reclamation and Delirium. So Splendid Reclamation, pretty obvious. You just cycle your lands, cycle your lands, cycle your lands, keep drawing cards. Eventually you draw into Splendid Reclamation, cast Splendid Reclamation, get back all your lands, and I don't know, start casting Part the Water Veils or Ulamogs or whatever big horrible finisher you want to put in your deck. But it's a pretty neat synergy to be able to cycle and then use the cycling as ramp, essentially, thanks to Splendid Reclamation. And with Delirium, Imperium, it's just a really easy way to get a land in the graveyard, and it doesn't cost you a card because you get to draw a new card. In Modern, things are also pretty interesting. One thing that works really well with cycling lands is Life from the Loam. This is actually a legacy trick, and there's decks built around this interaction. Of course, in Legacy, you have Wasteland. In Modern, we have Ghost Quarter, but the ability to cycle lands and then get them all back with Life from the Loam to draw some more cards turns Life from the Loam into this really grindy card advantage engine. Also, of course, all of the basic land types matter stuff works, so you can play these cycling lands with Valakut. Maybe this brings Splendid Reclamation Valakut up to the forefront of the format a little bit. Being able to cycle through your deck and then get up back all your lands and kill your opponent with Valakut also works with the Myria, one of my favorites. In Modern, I think it really comes down to how slow your deck's going to be. I don't expect, unless you have a really important synergy that the cycling lands support, you're not going to play these lands over shock lands, even over the Battle for Zendikar duels in a lot of cases, definitely not over fetch lands. So they're down in the rankings unless you're using Life from the Loam or have synergies like that. However, I can see slower controlling decks like Jeskai Control. They might actually want to take advantage of some number of these scry lands because it works really well with what they want to do. Leave up your removal, leave up your counter spells. If you don't need to use your mana to counter something or kill something, you can always cycle a land and draw another card. So it works well in certain slow controlling decks, but we'll have to see. I expect that they'll mostly see play in Modern in decks that really benefit from the synergies, primarily cycling, but also from the basic land types, but they might pop up in control decks as well. As far as other cards that we got from Amonkhet, we have Prowling Sepaperd, which is half cat, half snake. Technically, in ancient Egypt, it was a creature that was half leopard and half serpent, but pretty close for Magic. And this is quite the creature. For only 3 mana, you get a 4/3, which is pretty big. It can't be countered, and creature spells you control can't be countered. So I think this creature is decent. I think it has potential to see play. However, I'm not really sold on it being great in Standard. It lines up pretty poorly with a lot of removal, and as weird as it sounds, pretty much all creatures in Standard can't be countered because we don't have any good counter spells in Standard. This said, maybe Prowling Sepaperd is Wizards preemptively saying, maybe we're going to have some good counter spells or good blue spells. And of course, it's not going to be Force of Will, Mana Drain, things like that. But you could see with cycling, maybe a miscalculation or even a mana leak coming back to Standard. And if we do get spells like that, Prowling Sepaperd suddenly goes from an okay beater to must include in my deck to fight through counter spells. If not in the main deck, at least in the sideboard, because it would be such a great answer to counter spell heavy decks. Last but not least, we get another reprint, Renewed Faith, and this one might not look like much, but it's actually really good. So the question is, are we going to get any payoffs? And traditionally, Renewed Faith was a really important card in Astral Slide decks, which is a great cycling payoff. You cycle Renewed Faith, gain some life to keep yourself in the game, blink your Eternal Witness or whatever creature you have, your morph creature to flip it around, Exalted Angel or something. So you get a lot of value there, but we just don't know yet. We haven't seen enough payoffs to know if Renewed Faith will be important in Standard. If we get something even halfway as good as Astral Slide, this great cycling build around, then Renewed Faith is going to be a chase uncommon 4 of staple in Standard. If we don't get those payoffs, then maybe it's a sideboard card. Gaining 6 life could be relevant depending on what the meta looks like. Cycling to gain life is fine as well. Out of the sideboard of control decks to stay in the game against aggro. So we really got to wait and see on this one, but it's a sweet reprint and a really cool card, so I'm glad they reprinted it. I'm hopeful that maybe we'll see a payoff that makes it important to Standard. Anyway, that's been our daily Amonkhet spoilers for the day. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to let me know in the comments, what do you think? Where are you going to play the cycling lands? What do you think of the cat snake? Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.